Good afternoon. My name is Charles Prober, and I'm delighted to be with you virtually today to talk about global medical education and future directions. I must admit this is rather an ambitious topic for 25 minutes, but I'll do my best to begin the discussion. I wish I could be there with you in person, as was the plan, but as this map showing the prevalence of coronavirus infections in the world shows, you probably would prefer that I stay in the bright red zone, representing the United States, where the number of cases is substantially higher than the number of cases in your country. So here I am. About coronavirus, I would like to mention that before I got completely into medical education, which is what I mostly do now, I've been very involved in pediatric infectious diseases. And prophetically, the last edition of our textbook on pediatric infectious diseases, which was published in 2018, depicted the coronavirus on the cover. Now, again, I'd like to say that this represented a certain amount of forward thinking, but I must admit that the visuals was depicted because coronavirus is actually quite attractive under an electron microscopy image. It obviously is not so attractive when it is causing a pandemic that is so disruptive to the world. My intent for the next 20 minutes or so is to highlight a few elements related to my topic. I'd first like to put in context disruption in medical education, putting in context of disruption that is occurring in other industries. I'd then like to spend some time emphasizing why I believe medical education is in need of disruption. I would like to then share some personal opinions that I've published in a number of perspectives and commentaries over the years, and finally, a word about moving forward. So the age of disruption, what is the evidence that the world is disrupted even pre-COVID? Well, certainly if you look at other industries, such as the hotel industry, you know that the largest hotel in the world has no rooms. That, of course, would be Airbnb. Further evidence of a sharing economy is that the largest music distributor in the world does not have any artists. That would be iTunes. The largest retailer in the world has no stores. That would be Amazon. And the largest taxi company in the world, that would be Uber, has no cars. And again, as I said, this is before COVID hit. Disruption will only accelerate in the age of COVID. And when you look at universities, our industry, what are they going to look like in the 21st century as industries all around us are moving towards a shared economy, towards efforts that really capitalize on unification rather than division? So indeed, we live in an age of disruption. But why must medical education be disrupted? Again, from my point of view, there are several big reasons. One is that medical education is simply too expensive. In the United States, the average graduating debt for students going to public universities is about 100,000 US dollars. And private universities, the average debt is about $200,000. That is unsustainable. Secondly, I believe that medical education historically and presently has been too focused on rote memory. Students are expected to learn myriad facts, often to put them into their memory banks, and in doing so, it pushes out opportunities for different kinds of learning. Furthermore, as we all recognize, the number of facts which are appearing constantly are on an exponential pathway. And there is no possibility that the human mind can consume all of these facts and put them into context. And we know that there are ways for accessing these facts that are very efficient, whether it's on your smartphone or tablet, whatever your search strategy is. So I believe we should be spending more time fine-tuning the search capacity of our students, that is, how they can find reliable information, rather than trying to figure out how they can store that information in their brain. Another reason that I believe medical education needs to be disrupted is I believe that we're too fixated on form over function. That is, we worry too much about how the courses are organized, how they're integrated, whether they're in verticals or horizontals or in spirals. I illustrate this point by showing these curricular snapshots from 5 medical schools that have recently remodeled their curriculum. Those include, on the top line from left to right, Harvard's and Michigan's and Yale's, and on the bottom, starting on the left, Vanderbilt and Cornell. Excellent medical schools, all of whom had excellent curricula, who in curricular redesign really focused a lot, as illustrated by the colors and the directions of the boxes, have really focused on form. Now, they do a lot of functional changes in their curricular redesign as well, but I'm not sure why we have so much focus on what the curricula actually looks like. It reminds me of the Titanic, where which obviously had a disaster, and it was said that making changes to curriculum is sort of like moving the deck chairs around the Titanic, in terms of it doesn't really amount to any difference in the ultimate outcome. It's more important, in my opinion, to change what we teach and how we teach it, rather than the form. Furthermore, I think that medical education is far too siloed. That is, we teach medical students in one silo, nurses in another silo, advanced practitioners such as nurse practitioners and physicians' assistants in another silo. And I think we really need to break down those silos and enhance the opportunities for interprofessional education, because medical care is conducted by teams, and therefore medical education should be conducted in teams. Furthermore, medical education is far too long. In your country and many countries in the world, starting right after high school, it's at least 7 years, then followed by residency training, perhaps fellowship training or other advanced training. So by the time somebody gets into independent practice or independent research, they're in their late 30s or early 40s. Furthermore, for all of these reasons, medical education is simply too inefficient. So what I'd like to now touch on is some personal opinions about how we might disrupt medical education, and some trends that I hold and biases that I hold about medical education. And I will go through this part by representing some commentary, some perspectives that I've published over the years. For example, in 2012, in a perspective in the New England Journal of Medicine that I authored with Chip Heath, who's at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford, we argued that lecture halls were not an effective or an efficient way of delivering information to our student population. We rather proposed that it would be best to educate our students in more interactive ways, ways that were formulated around storytelling, stories of patients and patient diseases, rather than lectures about individual facts and conveyance of information. Lecture halls have probably not been overly popular for a very long time. This picture from Italy, a lecture hall back in the 12th century, depicted what it looked like. At least the lecture halls were full, as is shown here, but you can see the persons on the back row didn't seem to be particularly engaged with the so-called sage on the stage. A modern view of this lecture hall is a snapshot of a class at my medical school at Stanford. This was a core class in the middle of the week, core in the sense that students are responsible for this information, and you can see the number of students who choose to attend this kind of venue, a very small number. And they do that they don't attend because they have the opportunity to watch the lectures on video later, or they can read the syllabus and they choose not to attend because for them it is simply not an efficient or effective way to learn the material that's being presented at the lectures. This is, to me, a much more compelling picture of a more ideal lecture hall. And this is actually from another class at Stanford that we created in small group instruction with students interacting with each other, so near peers, facilitated by faculty, teaching associates who would wander through the classroom and support the learning, a very much more rich, interactive environment of problem solving together and engaging with the material in a rich and meaningful way. I described this in more detail in another publication. This was a commentary in the journal called Academic Medicine, published in 2013 with my friend and colleague Sal Khan. Sal is the founder of Khan Academy, a globally known educator, especially focused in the K through 12 space, and really talks a lot about the so-called flipped classroom, which is schematically demonstrated in medical education in this figure. The middle bar in this figure is meant to represent the students learning through whatever mechanism works best for them, whether it's reading textbooks or whether it's watching videos or reviewing PowerPoints or PDFs or whatever it is. They internalize the factual information, the foundational knowledge at their own pace, in their own space, until they actually have mastered the content. They actually know what the facts are, and they know how to access those facts through looking them up or by whatever mechanism. Then the top bar indicates the interaction that the students have with each other in learning environments that support the use of those facts, either in problem-based learning or team-based learning, in sessions that are meant to have them interacting with peers and really embedding that information in their mind. One of the classic examples of team-based learning is the gross dissection lab, where many of us have learned gross anatomy back in the first year of medical schools. Standardized patients are part of this. Interactive sessions, such as I depicted on a previous slide, indicate that sort of interactive learning. And the bottom part of this figure, with all of the arrows going downward, are meant to illustrate deep dives that individual students are supported in taking into areas that fit into their passion, whether they relate to clinical medicine or research or community-based activities, whatever they happen to be. Not every student can take all of the deep dives, of course, so you optimize the student's passion and take them and support their deep dives into a variety of different areas and individualize journeys for those students during their time in medical school. This commentary I published with Tao Li, a colleague, and I published it in Academic Medicine in 2018. And this was an argument for more collaboration between and across medical schools, both domestically and internationally, arguing that it is more efficient and a better product if you capitalize on the wisdom of the crowds of faculty and learners across schools, so that you could create material that could be shared between schools, and not every school has to reinvest in developing their own curriculum every year. In North America, that amounts to 150 instances of the curriculum being developed. It is simply not efficient or effective. And finally, this year, just recently in June, I was invited to author this perspective again in the New England Journal. In the wake of the National Board of Medical Examiners changing the way the national examinations were graded. As you may know, step one of the United States medical licensing examination has become, or was, a graded examination. A score was given. And that score took on a life of its own in terms of the student's evaluation, the evaluation of the student, and how residency programs began regarding students. And the exam was actually originally established as a pass-fail. But when it went to a 3-digit number, it took on, again, a life of its own, and it focused the student's energy on getting the highest score, on acquiring the greatest number of facts, of being able to regurgitate those facts on standardized examinations. And in my opinion, the untoward effects of that change to a 3-digit number really disrupted our ability to change medical education in very important ways. I was delighted and helped support the movement back to pass-fail, which will go into effect probably in 2022, because it will, again, in my opinion, allow students to rebalance what they're thinking about in terms of a medical education. And as I write in the last paragraph of this perspective, and I'll read it, it's on the slide, my own dream of medical education is reimagined, involves students and faculty working together, learning side by side in a richly interactive and engaging environment, and fostering evidence-based discussions and critical thinking and the development of the knowledge, skills, and behaviors that are required to cure sometimes, to relieve often, and to comfort always. And the final commentary, which is actually in press at this point in academic medicine, relates to a comparison between medical education and education, in this case, compared to education in business schools. I co-authored this with a former student who matriculated, Justin Norden, who was matriculating at the same time at Stanford in our medical school and in our business school. And we compared the pedagogical strategies of the two schools. And one of the comparisons that was most important to me and to Justin was that in the business school, they actually required students attending certain sessions where the student was responsible for contributing to the discussion, for contributing to the arguments, to demonstrate that they really were part of a team in wrestling with difficult, in that case, business problems. And we argued that this is something that we probably should begin requiring in medical school. We don't require lectures. We don't require even the attendance at the interactive sessions, except when patients are present. We argue in this particular commentary that we think required activities may become important in medical education. So summarizing those perspectives and commentaries, I predict that lecture halls will disappear or at least become much less frequent, that teaching as a result will become more interactive, that collaborations across medical schools will become commonplace and will enrich medical education, that there will be new student assessment strategies in the absence of this high stakes USMLE examination, and therefore balanced attention to all of the core competencies, not just knowledge, but also the core competencies of patient care, interpersonal and communication skills, professionalism, practice-based learning and improvement, and systems-based practice. All of these will have more emphasis and should have more emphasis in the future of medical education. And finally, what is the way forward? And to this, I celebrate what you are doing in Thailand and what other forward-thinking countries and universities are thinking. I know that Chulalongkorn University Medical International Program is scheduled to launch in June of 2021. And I am optimistic on your behalf that you will embrace many of these concepts and others in designing that curriculum of the future, which will serve the student of the future, and most importantly, the patients of the future. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to a future opportunity where I may return to Thailand post-COVID and enjoy your company in person. Thank you and best wishes.